Start video transmission. All right, so it looks like we are live once again in the studio in Northern California. We are still on chapter 34 of The Count of Monte Cristo, the part of the Colosseum. Our boys have just left the opera, and as Franz gets home, Albert tells him the good news. See, earlier, the boys couldn't find a cart to drive around in Rome for Carnival. Or not a cart, but a carriage and horses to drive around in Carnival. So what ended up happening is, as Franz returns home, Albert tells him he has a great idea. And his great idea is to hire a cart, kind of like a hay bale cart, and to have it driven by oxen, which will be easily found, and then they can dress up as peasants for the carnival. So Franz and Albert are really, really excited about this idea. And when we left off yesterday, Albert says, one thing I was sorry for when I bade him to have horns, when he wanted to have the horns of the oxen gilded. He told Signor Pastrini that there would not be time, as it would require 3 days to do that. And then, so we're going to hear Albert say that, and we're going to go directly into where Franz goes, and where is he now? Talking about Signor Pastrini. So, without too much further ado, we are going to go into a scene where the boys are really, really excited about their new idea, and that new idea is going to get thwarted here in just a few seconds. So here we go.
As it would require 3 days to do that.
And where is he now? Who? Our host. Gone out in search of our equipage. By tomorrow it might be too late. Then he will be able to... Then he will be able to give us an answer tonight. It's a Wednesday morning, so I'm a little stiff, but I did my warm-ups as usual. Here we go.
In search of our equipage. By tomorrow it might be too late.
Then he will be able to give us an answer tonight. Oh, I expect him any minute. At this instant, the door opened, and the head of Signor Pastrini appeared. Permesso, he inquired. Certainly, certainly, cried Franz. Come in, my host. Now then, asked Albert eagerly, have you found the desired cart and oxen? Better than that, replied Signor Pastrini, with the air of a man perfectly well satisfied with himself. Take care, my worthy host, said Albert. Better is a sure enemy to well. Let your excellencies only leave the matter to me, returned Signor Pastrini, in a tone indicative of unbounded self-confidence. Oh, that's a good one. A tone of unbounded self-confidence. Cool.
Unbounded self-confidence.
We should all have unbounded self-confidence. Here we go.
In a tone indicative of unbounded self-confidence.
But what have you done? Asked Franz. Speak out, there's a worthy fellow. Your excellencies are aware, responded the landlord, swelling with importance, that the Count of Monte Cristo is living on the same floor with yourselves. I should think we did know it, exclaimed Albert, since it is owing to that circumstance that we are packed into these small rooms like two poor students in the back streets of Paris. Well, then, the Count of Monte Cristo, hearing of the dilemma in which you are placed, has sent to offer you seats in his carriage and 2 places at his windows in the Palazzo Ruspoli. The friends looked at each other with unutterable surprise. But what do you think? Asked Albert. That we ought to accept such offers from a perfect stranger. What sort of person is this Count of Monte Cristo? Asked Franz of his host. A very great nobleman, but whether Maltese or Sicilian, I cannot almost. I cannot exactly say. Okay, here we go.
Asked Franz of his host.
A very great nobleman, but whether Maltese or Sicilian, I cannot exactly say. But this I know, that he is noble as Borghese, and rich as a gold mine. As a Borghese? As a Borgia. As noble as a Borgia. It's not a Borghese. Sometimes the translations
that he is noble as Borghese. But this I know, that he...
But this I know is where we're going back to.
This or Sicilian I cannot exactly say.
But this I know, he is noble as a Borgia, and rich as a gold mine. It seems to me, said Franz, speaking in an undertone to Albert, that if this person merited the high parenetics of our landlord, he would have conveyed his invitation through another channel, and not permitted it to be brought to us in this unceremonious way. He would have written, or... At this instant someone knocked at the door. "Come in," said Franz. A servant wearing a livery... I always want to say livery. Is it livery? Livery or livery? I don't know. Does it matter? Probably. Oh, okay. Actually, let's go ahead and look that up. Livery. L-I-V-E-R-Y. You can't see what I'm doing, but I'm looking up the pronunciation of livery. Pronunciation. Livery press.
Livery.
It's livery. See? We learn new things every single day. We're going to put that down for now. Livery. A servant wearing a livery of considerable style. Let's check this out. Here we go.
Come in, said Franz.
A servant wearing a livery of considerable style and richness appeared at the threshold, and placing 2 cards in the landlord's hands, who forthwith presented them to the 2 young men, he said, "Please deliver these from the Count of Monte Cristo to Vicomte Albert de Morcerf and Mr. Franz de Ipny, the Count of Monte Cristo," continued the servant. Ooh. That was supposed to be continued. Okay. That's the beginning of a sentence, hence the comma. Here we go.
De Morcerf and Mr. Franz de Ipny.
"The Count of Monte Cristo," continued the servant, "begs these gentlemen's permission to wait upon them as their neighbor, and he will be honored by an intimation of what time they will please to receive him." "Faith, Franz," whispered Albert, "there's not much to find fault with here." "Tell the Count," replied Franz, "that we will do ourselves the pleasure of calling on him." The servant bowed and retired. "That is what I call an elegant mode of attack," said Albert. "You were quite correct You were quite correct. Were you? Were you quite correct? Here we go.
I call an elegant mode of attack, said Albert.
You were quite correct in what you said. You were quite correct in what you said, Signor Pastrini. The Count of Monte Cristo is unquestionably a man of first-rate breeding and knowledge of the world. "Then you accept his offer," said the host. "Of course we do," replied Albert. "Still, I must own I am sorry to be obliged to give up the cart and the group of reapers. It would produce such an effect, and were it not for the windows at the Palazzo Ruspoli, by way of recompense for the loss of our beautiful scheme, I don't know what I should have held... Sometimes you just get lost, and when you get lost, it's time to stop. And hopefully the dog sent you.
It's for the loss of our beautiful scheme. I don't know what I should have held...
We're not lost of our beautiful scheme. There's a big breath there, but we're going to keep that breath in. I like that breath, because that's Albert speaking anyway.
The loss of our beautiful scheme.
Okay. Cool beans. Those are the beans that are not hot beans. All right, here we go. Loss of our beautiful scheme.
By way of recompense for the loss of our beautiful scheme.
I don't know what I should have held on by my original plan. What say you, Franz? Oh, I agree with you. The windows in the Palazzo Ruspoli alone decided me. The truth was that the mention of the...
Windows in the Palazzo Ruspoli alone decided me.
The truth was that the mention of 2 places in the Palazzo Ruspoli had recalled to Franz the conversation he had overheard. All right, come on. We're doing exposition now, and sometimes when you get exposition, you have to bring everything back down a little bit. Bring it to a head. Allow the listener to breathe. Even the listener has to breathe.
Windows in the Palazzo Rispoli alone decided me.
The truth was that the mention of two places in the Palazzo Rispoli had recalled to Franz the conversation he had overheard the preceding evening in the ruins of the Colosseum between the mysterious unknown and the Transterevan, in which the stranger in the cloak had undertaken to obtain the freedom of a condemned criminal. And if this muffled-up individual proved... muffled-up individual. That's actually what that is. It's a muffled-up individual. How many muffled-up individuals do you come across on a daily basis? Here we go.
Taken to obtain the freedom of a condemned criminal.
Ooh, there's a breath there and so much mouth snapping. My goodness. Let me keep the breath.
Of a condemned criminal.
Maybe not.
In which
Let's go back. Hydrate again. No matter how much I drink and drink, I am always dehydrated about 5 minutes in. It's just the problem. Okay, here we go. Align the shoulders, align the chakras. Sit up, shoulders back, neck stretches. Here we go.
Between the mysterious unknown and the Transterevan.
In which the stranger in the cloak had undertaken to obtain the freedom of a condemned criminal. And if this muffled-up individual proved, as Franz felt sure he would, the same as the person he had just seen at the Teatro Argentina. At the
same as criminal. And if this...
All right, we're breathing heavy. Got a lot of mouth clicks today. It means we're just a little overexcited. Let's get the adrenaline down. Okay, deep breaths. Nice. Here we go.
Had undertaken to obtain the freedom of a condemned criminal.
And if this muffled-up individual proved, as Franz felt sure he would, the same as the person he had just seen in the Teatro Argentina, then he should be able to establish his identity, and also to prosecute his researches respecting him with perfect facility and freedom. Franz passed the night in confused dreams, respecting the two meetings he had already had with his mysterious tormentor, and in waking speculations. There we go. We do need to delete that first trial over here, so we stay true to our punch and roll. Always stay true to the punch and roll. And
in waking,
keeping the breath. And in waking.
He had already had with his mysterious tormentor.
And in waking speculations as to what the morrow would produce. The next day must clear up every doubt, and unless his near neighbor and would-be friend, the Count of Monte Cristo, possessed the ring of Gyges, and by its power able to render himself invisible, it was very certain he could not escape this time. 8 o'clock found Franz up and dressed, while Albert, who had not the same motives for early rising, was still soundly asleep. The first act of Franz was to summon his landlord, who presented himself with his accustomed obsequiousness. "Pray, Signor Pastrini," asked Franz, "is not some execution appointed to take place today?"
"Yes, Your Excellency, but if your reason for inquiry is that you may procure a window to view it from, you are much too late."
"Oh, no," answered Franz. "I had no such intention, and even if I had felt I had no such intention." All right, he does not start there. Good.
"Oh, no," answered Franz.
"I had no such intention, and even if I had felt a wish to witness the spectacle, I might have done so from Monte Pincino, could I not?"
"Ah!"
exclaimed mine host. Exclaimed mine frere.
"Pincino, could I not?"
going to say exclaimed, the. You're like, did you just type in a new word that you didn't want to say? And the word answer is, yes, I did. And you're saying, well, can you do that? Yes, I can. Is that right? Who cares? Here we go.
I might have done so from Monte, could I not? Exclaimed the host. I did not think it likely your excellency would have chosen to mingle with such a rabbit.
Ooh. Try that again.
Exclaimed the host. I did not think it likely your excellency would have chosen to mingle with such a rabble as are always collected on that hill, which, indeed, they consider as exclusively belonging to themselves.
Very possibly I may not go, answered Franz. But in case I feel disposed, give me some particulars of today's executions.
What particulars your excellency like to...
What particular... Wood. Nope. Okay, we gotta bring it all the way back to there.
Particulars of today's executions. What particulars would your excellency like to hear?
Why, the numbers of persons condemned to suffer, their names, and description of the death they are to die.
That happens just lucksy.
Just lucksy, your excellency. Just lucksy, your excellency.
Description of the death they are to die. That happens just lucky, your excellency. Only a few minutes ago they brought me the tavolettas.
What are they?
Sort of wooden tablets hung up at the corners of the...
Sort of wooden tablets, but do it as if you were playing the Super Mario Brothers. I'm kidding.
Tavolettas. What are they? Sort of wooden tablets hung up at the corners of streets the evening before an execution, on which is pasted up a paper containing the names of the condemned persons, their crimes, and mode of punishment. The reason for so publicly announcing all this is that all good and faithful Catholics may offer up their prayers for the unfortunate culprits, and, above all, beseech of heaven to grant them a sincere repentance.
A sincere, not a sincere, a sincere. Okay. But we can back that up. That's right. Back that up.
And, above all, beseech of heaven to grant them a sincere.
Pop.
The unfortunate culprits. And, above all, beseech of heaven to grant them.
I've lost my spot. All right, here we go.
The unfortunate culprits. And, above all, beseech of heaven to grant them a sincere repentance.
And these tablets are brought to you that you may aid your prayers to those of the faithful, are they? Asked Franz, somewhat incredulously.
Oh, dear no, your excellency. I have not time for anybody's affairs but my own and those of my honorable guests. But I make an agreement with the man who pastes up the papers, and he brings them to me as he would the playbills, that in case any person staying at my hotel should like to witness an execution, he may obtain every requisite information concerning the time and place, etc.
The best way to do an Italian accent, especially a early 1800s Italian accent, is you got to use your hands. I cannot stress this enough. Okay, here we go. Etc.
Concerning the time and place, etc.
Upon my word, that is a most delicate attention on your part, Signor Pastrini, cried Franz.
Why, your excellency,
returned the landlord, chuckling and rubbing his hands with infinite complacency.
I think I may take upon myself to say I neglect nothing to deserve the support and patronage of the noble visitors to this poor hotel.
I see that plainly enough, my most excellent host, and you may rely upon me to proclaim so striking a proof of your attention to your guests wherever I go. Meanwhile, oblige me by a sight of one of these tavolettas.
Nothing can be easier than to comply with your Excellency's wish, said the landlord, opening the door of the chamber. I have caused one to be placed on the landing, close by your apartment.
Then, taking the tablet from the wall, he handed it to Franz, who read as follows. The public is informed that on Wednesday, February 23rd, being the first day of the carnival, executions will take place in the Piazza del Popolo by order of the Tribunal of the Rota of two persons named Andrea Rondolo and Peppino, otherwise called Rocca Priori. The former found guilty of the murder of a venerable and almost. My breathing still feels a little off and a little tight. But that's okay. We'll be just fine. We'll get through this. I promise.
Otherwise called Rocca Priori.
The former found guilty of the murder of a venerable and exemplary priest named Don Cesare Torlini, canon of the Church of St. John Lateran, and the latter convicted of being an accomplice of the atrocious and bloody bandit Luigi Vampa and his band. The first named malefactor will be Mazzolato, the second culprit, Decapitato. That's where we're at, breakfasts and beheadings. Dun, 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 dun. We're going to breakfast first, before the beheadings.
The second culprit, Decapitato.
The prayers of all good Christians are entreated for these unfortunate men, that it may please God to awaken them to a sense of their guilt, and to grant them a hearty and sincere repentance for their crimes. Cool. Sometimes you go from narrator mode to narrator mode. I can't remember what my coach called it, but it's like super narrator or narrator of the gods, voice of God or whatever. Okay. Oh, let's stretch out a little bit. We've got some exposition coming, and we want to make this as calm and cool as possible because there's going to be so much dialogue. Okay. Here we go.
Repentance for their crimes.
This was precisely. This was precisely what Franz had heard the evening before in the ruins of the Colosseum. No part of the program differed. The names of the condemned persons, their crimes, and mode of punishment all agreed with his previous information. In all probability, therefore, the Transteravan was no other than the bandit Luigi Vampa himself, and the man shrouded in the mantle was the same he had known as. Yeah, there's a was in there that should be in there. Luigi Vampa. And the man shrouded in the mantle was the same he had known as Sinbad the Sailor, but who no doubt was still pursuing his philanthropic expedition in Rome, as he had already done at Porto Vecchio and Tunis. Time was getting on, however, and Franz deemed it advisable to awaken Albert. Here we go. Time was getting on, however, and Franz deemed it advisable to awaken Albert. But at the moment he prepared to proceed to his chamber, his friend entered the room in perfect costume for the day. The anticipated delights of the carnival had so run in his head as to make him leave his pillow long before his usual hour. "Now, my excellent Signor Pastrini," said Franz, addressing his landlord, "since we are both ready, do you think we may proceed at once to visit the Count of Monte Cristo?"
"Most assuredly," he replied. "The Count of Monte Cristo is always an early riser, and I can answer for his having been up these 2 hours.
Then you really consider we shall not be intruding if we pay our respects to him directly?"
"Oh, I am quite sure. I will take all the blame on myself if you find I have led you into an error."
"Well then, if it be so, are you ready, Albert?" "Perfectly." "Let us go and return our best thanks for his courtesy." "Yes, let us do so." The landlord preceded the friends across the landing, which was all that separated. Okay. All right. Sometimes a sentence makes sense. Sometimes it takes 2 times. And that's all right. Not feeling too good myself. Okay, here we go.
Yes, let us do so.
The landlord preceded the friends across the landing, which was all that separated them from the apartments of the Count, rang at the bell, and upon the door being opened by a servant, said, Francesi.
And upon the door being opened by a servant, said,
I signori Francesi. The domestic bowed respectfully and invited them to enter. They passed through 2 rooms, furnished in a luxurious manner they had not expected to see under the roof of Signor Pastrini, and were shown into an elegantly fitted-up drawing-room. The richest Turkey carpets covered the floor, and the softest and most inviting couches, easy-chairs, and sofas offered their high-piled and yielding cushions to such as desire repose or refreshment. Oh, a desired repose. Doesn't one love to desire reposes?
chairs and sofas offered their
Okay, we got that breath, but we're just going to take it slightly back. Sofas. All right. Offered their high-piled and yielding cushions to such as desired repose or refreshment. There it is. That's the one.
couches, easy chairs, and sofas.
Offered their high-piled and yielding cushions to such as desired repose or refreshment. Splendid paintings by the first masters. Splenda paintings. Paintings made with Splenda. Ew. All right. Aspartame. Gross.
Such as desired repose or refreshment.
Splendid paintings by the first masters were ranged against the walls, intermingled with magnificent trophies of war, while heavy curtains of costly tapestry were suspended before the doors of the different doors of the room. There's an alliteration that's going to be tough.
Trophies of war.
Trophies of war. Here we go.
Intermingled with magnificent trophies of war.
While heavy curtains of costly tapestry were suspended before the different doors of the room. Your Excellencies will please to be seated. Oh, if your Excellencies will be pleased to be seated.
Suspended before the different doors of the room.
If your Excellencies will please to be seated, said the man, I will let the Count know that you are here. And with these words he disappeared behind one of the tapestried doors. As the door opened, the sound of a bell reached the ears of the young men, but was almost immediately lost, for the rapid closing of the door merely allowed one rich swell of harmony to enter. Franz and Albert looked inquiringly at each other, and then at the gorgeous furnishings of the apartment. Everything seemed more magnificent at a second view than it had done at their first rapid survey. Well, said Franz to his friend, what do you think of all this? Why, upon my soul, my dear fellow, it strikes me that our elegant and attentive neighbor must either be some successful stock jobber who has speculated in the fall of the Spanish funds, or some prince traveling incognito. Hush, hush, replied Franz. We shall ascertain who and what he is. He comes. As Franz spoke, he heard the sound of a door turning on its hinges, and almost immediately afterwards the tapestry was drawn aside, and the owner of all these riches stood before the 2 young men. Albert instantly rose to meet him, but Franz remained, in a manner, spellbound on his chair. For in the person of him who had just entered, he recognized not only the mysterious visitant to the Colosseum and the occupant of the box at the Teatro Argentina, but also his extraordinary host of Monte Cristo. Excellent. All right. I can't believe we finished the chapter. That chapter is now fully all done, and we are at 1 hour and 9 minutes. Dang. That is a longin'. Okay, one thing we are going to do is we are going to trim the beginning to just shy of right around 3/4 of a second. And we are going to join all of these tracks together. It's going to take a few minutes, so I'm just going to talk while this is working. But the reason I join all of the tracks together at this juncture before I save it and go on to something else is because I've created all these different smaller little tracks, anywhere from 2 seconds to 3 minutes. And when I go back in and I start to cut and change things, because they're all stuck together, if I move one thing, it might move everything out of place. So if I create it as one huge long track, I can cut in and cut out with various ease without worrying about some other recording kind of moving out of place. It also makes it easier when I do the cleanup, which is the next step. But you don't have to watch that step because it's kind of a boring step. Actually, this step is kind of a boring step as well. All right. Well, while this is waiting to happen, we've got about another. It's going very slowly. Sorry about that. But, that's the way things are. If you are listening and hanging out right now, please feel free to jump into the chat, say hello, ask me some questions that I can probably answer here in a few minutes. And if nobody's there, then that's fine too. We are just about ready. I do need to clean this up, but I can do that later when it's not so hot in the studio. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do chapter 35, La Mozzolata. And so we are going to be introduced to a third voice. And as we can, if you remember correctly, I haven't found the Count of Monte Cristo's voice, but I want him to be just a little bit raspy, just a little bit aloof. So but he's also sly and very arrogant. So I'm trying to figure out in my head who I would cast in this role. I'm not going to tell you that because you might hear an impression and I don't want you to hear that. Okay, so we have joined, we are saving, we are closing that out, and we are going to open up another one so that we can get ready to do this. And it's probably lost off of your screen, so I'm going to have to go back in and fix that. Give me just a second while I do it. La la la. So we are saving, and this is going to be CMC. What do we look like? It is going to be CMC C35. CMC C35. Excellent. Okay, we're just finding a place to go put it, which we're going to put it in the count to make sure this is all together. Let's save that bad boy, and we're going to go over to our dashboard over here and make sure that that's in the right space. Nope. We need to change up which logic program. That's Colosseum. We're going to go find logic. Oh, did you disappear? You disappeared. Huh. For some reason, we've lost our newest scene. So we are going to cancel. We are going to delete that. Okay, that's going to go. And then we're going to add another source. And we're going to add our media file. Oh, current application. Yeah, capture an application. And no. Add source. And, oh, everything's getting all funky here. Okay, well, I should have thought of this first. Okay, so we're just going to have a blank space. So why don't we move this up over here, and we'll make it a lot bigger, and you just won't be able to see the recording as I'm working on the recording itself. And then I'll figure out how to do that next time. So right now we're starting with chapter 35, La Mazzolata. La Mazzolata. Let's get some fun juice. And I can see that nobody's been hanging about, which is fine, I guess. Maybe we'll get some listeners or some watchers later on. Who knows? And we're going to finish this and get to work. Here we go. Chapter 35. La Mozzelata. Gentlemen, said the Count of Monte Cristo as he entered, I pray you excuse me for suffering my visit to be anticipated, but I feared to disturb you by presenting myself earlier at your apartments. Besides, you sent me word that you would come to me, and I have held myself at your disposal. All right, who's talking? That seems nice. I have held myself at your disposal. Calm, assured, an abundance of assurity. Was that what it was?
And I've held myself at your disposal.
Franz and I have to thank you 1,000 times, Count, returned Albert. You extricated us from a great dilemma, and we were on the point of inventing a very fantastic vehicle when your friendly invitation reached us. Indeed, returned the Count, motioning the 2 young men to sit down. It was the fault of that blockhead Pastrini that I did not sooner assist you in your distress. He did not mention a syllable of your embarrassment to me, when he knows... It's a little too... Yeah, that's not quite right, so I'm gonna over-articulate him a little bit.
Returned the Count, motioning the 2 young men to sit down.
It was the fault of that blockhead Pastrini that I did not sooner assist you in your distress. He did not mention a syllable of your embarrassment to me when he knows that, alone and isolated as I am, I seek every opportunity of making the acquaintance of my neighbors. Acquaintance of my neighbors. We don't want that, that vampire. I mean, yeah, but no.
Returned the Count, motioning the 2 young men to sit down.
It was the fault of that blockhead Pastrini that I did not sooner assist you in your distress. He did not mention a syllable of your embarrassment to me when he knows that, alone and isolated as I am, I seek every opportunity of making the acquaintance of my neighbors. As soon as acquaintance of my neighbors. That's kind of nice. That's, yeah.
Making the acquaintance of my neighbors.
As soon as I learned I could anyway assist you, I most eagerly seized the opportunity of offering my services. The 2 young men bowed. Franz had as yet found nothing to say. He had come to no determination, and as nothing in the Count's manner manifested the wish that he should recognize him, he did not know whether to make any allusion to the past, or wait until he had more proof. Besides, although sure it was he who had been in the box the previous evening,
Besides.
Start at besides. There we go. What time are we at? Oh, perfect timing. Boop-a-doo, where are we? Besides.
Or wait until he had more proof.
Besides, although Franz was sure it was he who had been in the box in the previous evening. Fuck. All right, let's try this back again, and, oh, darn is what I meant to say. Okay, here we go.
Or wait until he had more proof.
Besides, although Franz was sure it was he who had been in the box the previous evening, he could not be equally positive that this was the man he had seen at the Colosseum. He resolved therefore to let things take their course without making any direct overture to the Count. Moreover, he had this advantage. He was master of the Count's secret, while the Count had no hold on Franz, who had nothing to conceal. However, he resolved to lead the conversation to a subject which might possibly clear up his doubts. "Count," he said, "you have offered us places in your carriage and at your windows in the Rispoli Palace. Can you tell us where we can obtain a sight of the Piazza del Popolo?" "Ah," said the Count negligently, looking attentively at Morcerf. Morcerf.
Tell us where we can obtain a sight to the Piazza del Popolo.
Ah, said the Count negligently, looking attentively at Morcerf. Is there not something like an execution upon the Piazza del Popolo? Yes, returned Franz, finding that the Count was coming to the point he wished. Stay, I think I told my steward yesterday to attend to this. Perhaps I can render you this slight service as well. Perhaps I can render you this slight service as well. Whew, we need to take a break here soon.
I told my steward yesterday to attend to this.
Perhaps I can render you this slight service also. He extended his hand and rang the bell thrice. Did you ever occupy yourself? He
extended his hand and rang the bell thrice.
Did you ever occupy yourself, he said to Franz, with the employment of time and the means of simplifying the summoning of your servants? I have. When I ring once, it is for my valet, twice for my major domo, thrice for my steward. Thus, I do not waste a minute or a word. Here he is. A man of about 45 or 50 entered, exactly resembling the smuggler who had introduced Franz into the caravan, but he did not appear to recognize him. It was evident he had his orders. Sir Bertuccio, said the Count, you have procured me windows looking on the Piazza del Popolo as I ordered you yesterday.
Yes, Your Excellency. The Popolo as I ordered you yesterday.
Yes, Excellency, returned the steward. Yes, Excellency, you lost your place.
The Popolo as I ordered you yesterday.
Yes, Excellency, returned the steward, but it was very late. Did I not tell you I wished for one? Replied the Count, frowning.
And Your Excellency has one, which was let to Prince Lobaniev, but I was obliged to pay 100.
That will do, Sir Bertuccio. Spare these gentlemen all such domestic arrangements. You have the window, that is sufficient. Give the orders to the coachman, and be in readiness on the stairs to...
Sufficient.
Burp-der.
You have the window, that is sufficient.
Give orders to the coachman, and be in readiness on the stairs to conduct us to it. The steward bowed and was about to quit the room. Ah, continued the Count, be good enough to ask Pastrini if he has received the tavoletta, and if he can send us an account of the execution. There's no need to do that, said Franz, taking out his tablets, for I saw the account and copied it down. Very well. You can retire, Mr. Bertuccio. I need you no longer. Let us know when breakfast is ready. These gentlemen, he added, turning to the two friends, will, I trust, do me the honor to breakfast with me. But, my dear Count, said Albert, we shall abuse your kindness. Not at all. On the contrary, you will give me great pleasure. You will, one or other of you, perhaps both, return it to me at Paris. Mr. Bertuccio, lay covers for 3. I don't know what lay covers means, but it doesn't matter. It probably means set the table for 3.
Bertuccio, lay covers for 3.
He then took Franz's tablets out of his hand. We announce, he read, in the same... We announce...
took Franz's tablets out of his hand.
We announce. He read in the same tone with which he would have read a newspaper, that today, the 23rd of February, will be executed Andrea Rondello, guilty of murder on the person of the respected and venerated Don Cesar Torlini, canon of the Church of St. John Lateran, and Peppino, called Rocco Priori, convicted of complicity with the detestable bandit Luigi Vampa and the men of his band. The first will be Mazzolato, the second Decapitato. Yes, continued the Count. It was at first arranged in this way, but I think since yesterday some change has taken place in the order of the ceremony.
Really? Said Franz.
Yes. I passed the evening at the Cardinal Rospigliosi's, and there was mention made of something like a pardon for one of the two men.
For Andrea Rondello? Asked Franz.
No, replied the Count carelessly. For the other. He glanced at the tablets as if to recall the name. For Peppino, called Rocco Priori. Rocco Priori. Okay. For Peppino, called Rocco Priori. You are thus deprived of seeing a man guillotined. But the mazzolata still remains, which is a very curious punishment when seen for the first time, and even the second, while the other, as you know, is very simple. The guillotine never fails, never trembles, never strikes 30 times ineffectually, like the soldier who beheaded the Count of Chalais, and to whose tender mercy Richelieu had doubtless recommended the sufferer. Oh, added the Count in a contemptuous tone. Do not tell me of European punishments. They are in the infancy, or rather the old age, of cruelty.
Really, Count, replied Franz, one would think that you had studied the different tortures of all the nations of the world.
There are, at least, few that I have not seen, said the Count coldly.
And you took pleasure in beholding these dreadful spectacles?
My first sentiment was horror, the second indifference, the third curiosity.
Curiosity? That is a terrible word.
It is a terrible word. It is a terrible word. Because it killed the cat. It killed the poor kitten. Poor curiosity. All right. All right, it is 9:17. We have just about been doing this for about an hour, and we are coming down to curiosity. That is a terrible word. Let's give it one more page or two, see how we feel.
Curiosity? That is a terrible word.
Why so? In life, our greatest preoccupation is death. Is it not then curious to study the different ways by which the soul and body can part, and how, according to their different characters, temperaments, and even the different customs of their countries, different persons bear the transition from life to death, from existence to annihilation? I, for myself, can assure you of one thing. The more men you see die. The more men you see die, the easier it becomes to die yourself. And in my opinion, death may be a torture, but it is not an expiation.
I do not quite understand you, replied Franz. Pray, explain your meaning, for you excite my curiosity to the highest pitch.
Listen, said the Count, and deep hatred mounted to his face, as the blood would to the face of any other. If a man had, by unheard of and excruciating tortures, destroyed your father, your mother, your betrothed, and who, when torn from you, left a desolation, a wound that never closes in your breast, do you think the reparation that society gives you is... All right, once I've started this monologue, I can't finish it, so we're going to hit it to the end. In your breast.
The desolation, a wound that never closes in your breast.
Do you think the reparation that society gives you is sufficient when it interposes the knife of the guillotine between the base of the skull and the trapezial muscles of the murderer, and allows him who has caused us years of moral sufferings to escape with a few moments of physical pain? Yes, I know, said Franz, that human injustice is insufficient to console us. She can give blood in return for blood, that is all. But you must demand from her only what it is in her power to grant. I will put another case to you, continued the Count, that were society attacked, not where society attacked, that were society attacked. All right.
Case to you, continued the Count.
That were society attacked by the death of a person avenges death by death. No, it is where. That where society.
Case to you, continued the Count.
That where society attacked by the death of a person avenges death by death. But are there not 1,000 tortures by which a man may be made to suffer without society taking the least cognizance of them, or offering him even the insufficient means of vengeance of which we have just spoken? Are there not crimes for which the impalement of the Turks, the augurs of the Persians, the stake and the brand of the Iroquois Indians are inadequate tortures, and which are unpunished by society? Answer me. Do not these crimes exist? Yes, answered Franz, and it is to punish them that dueling is tolerated. Dueling, cried the Count, a pleasant manner, upon my soul, of arriving at your end.
Cried the Count.
I don't think the Count believes in dueling, or likes it very much. Here we go.
Dueling, cried the Count.
A pleasant manner, upon my soul, of arriving at your end when that end is vengeance. A man has carried off your mistress. A man has seduced your wife. A man has dishonored your daughter. He has rendered the whole life of one who had the right to expect from heaven that portion of happiness God has promised to every one of his creatures, an existence of misery and infamy. And you think you are avenged because you send a ball through the head, or pass a sword through the breast of that man who has planted madness in your brain, and despair in your heart. And remember, moreover, that it is often he who comes off victorious from the strife, absolved of all crime in the eyes of the world. No, no, continued the Count. Had I to avenge myself, it is not thus I would take revenge. Then you disapprove of dueling? You would not fight a duel? Asked Albert in his turn, astonished at this strange theory. Oh, yes, replied the Count. Understand me. I would fight a duel for a trifle, for an insult, for a blow, and the most...
For an insult, for a blow.
And the most more so, and the more so that, and the more so that.
Would fight a duel for a trifle, for an insult, for a blow.
And the more so that, thanks to my skill in all bodily exercises and the indifference to danger I have gradually acquired, I should be almost certain to kill my man. Oh, I would fight for such a cause, but in return for slow, profound, eternal torture, I would give back the same, were it possible. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, as the Orientalists say. Our masters in everything, those favored creatures who have formed for themselves a life of dreams and a paradise of realities. But, said Franz to the Count,
With this theory, which renders you at once judge and executioner of your own cause, it would be difficult to adopt a course that would forever prevent your falling under the power of the law. Hatred is blind, rage carries you away, and he who pours out vengeance runs the risk of tasting a bitter drought. Yes, if he be poor and inexperienced, not if he be rich and skillful. Besides, the worst that could happen to him that would be the punishment of which we have already spoken, and which the philanthropic French Revolution has substituted for being torn to pieces by horses or broken on the wheel. What matters this punishment as long as he is avenged? On my word, I almost regret that in all probability this miserable Peppino will not be beheaded, as you might have had an opportunity then of seeing how short a time the punishment lasts, and whether it is worth even mentioning. But really, this is a most singular conversation for the Carnival, gentlemen. How did it arise? Oh, I recollect. You asked for a place at my window. You shall have it. But let us first... You shall have it. You asked for a place at my window. You shall have it. But let us first sit down to a table, for here comes the servants to inform us that breakfast is ready. As he spoke, a servant opened one of the 4 doors of the apartment, saying, El suo comodo. The 2 young men arose and entered the breakfast room. Excellent. And that is like seriously perfect timing. All right, there we are. Oh, okay. So that is going to do it for this part of chapter 34, or the end of 34 and the beginning of 35. And now we are going to sit down to breakfast, which is a good time for me to take a break and call it a day from streaming. So thank you all for hanging out. We are at 57 minutes and 17 seconds. We have recorded, let us see, just about, 13 minutes plus 13 minutes. We've recorded just about 27 minutes in that time, which is not bad considering we had to break in the beginning, in the middle for changing up the chapter, and we were moving a little slow with getting Signor Pastrini's dialect rocking. So, yeah. So that is not bad. That is a 2-to-1 ratio. And anyway, thank you for hanging out, and you have a lovely day. Take care. Okay. Boom.